The Seventh Trumpet, the Final Seal. Chapter 1, The Gate and the Lamb. Flashback, the 11th hour. The air inside the holding cell was stale, smelling of ozone and recycled fear. 5 of them sat in the semi-darkness, the hum of the smart city vibrating through the metal floor plates. They were a ragtag collection of the resistance, brought together not by blood, but by the spirit. Ravi sat in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest. He was an Indian man of slight build but sharp intellect, a former tech engineer for the very beast system that now held them. Beside him was Marcus, a towering black man whose silence was louder than the drone of the ventilation. Across from them sat Karen, a middle-aged white woman clutching her rosary, not for prayer to Mary, but as a habit she was breaking as she learned to pray to the Father directly. Usha, a Mexican woman with eyes red from weeping, held on to Susan, a young Caucasian girl no older than 12, who was shivering despite the humidity. They had heard the message, they had rejected the mark, and now they were slated for public execution at dawn to inaugurate the final lockdown. "The gates close in 20 minutes, Marcus whispered, his voice a deep rumble. Once they seal the dome, the atmosphere cyclers switch to the neurogas. We won't just be trapped, we'll be pacified." Ravi looked up. His hands, usually trembling with anxiety, were strangely steady. He had spent the last hour in earnest, silent prayer, repenting for the years he had spent mocking the Outlanders and their primitive faith. He had designed the targeting algorithms for the Alset drones. He owed a debt. "Lord," Ravi whispered, "accept my life as a ransom for theirs." He moved to the locking mechanism of his mag cuffs. It was a biometric lock, uncrackable by force. But Ravi knew the backdoor code, a developer's override he had written years ago. With a series of precise taps against the sensor, the green light flickered. Click. His cuffs fell. The others gasped. Ravi moved quickly, ignoring their questions. He went to Marcus, then Karen, then Usha and Susan. Click, click, click. "How?" Usha breathed. "Grace," Ravi said. He moved to the cell door. "I can override the door, but the corridor sensors are hardwired to a dead man switch at this terminal. Someone has to hold the circuit open manually, or the alarms trip instantly, and the hunter robots will be on us before we make the lift." Marcus stood up. "I'll do it. You know the way out, Ravi." "No," Ravi said, his voice firm. He looked Marcus in the eye. "You are the protector. You get them to the mountains. I have much to answer for. I spent my life building this cage. It is fitting that I stay to open it." "Ravi," Karen started. "Go!" Ravi shouted, slamming his hand onto the terminal. The door hissed open. "The gates are closing! Run!" Marcus hesitated, looking at the small Indian man who stood like a giant in the face of death. He nodded once, a warrior's salute. He scooped up Susan, who had a twisted ankle from their capture, and ran. Ravi watched them disappear down the sleek, white corridor. He turned back to the screen, watching the percentage of the gate closure. 85%, 90%. He closed his eyes. "Into your hands, Father." The run was a blur of burning lungs and terror. Marcus carried Susan as if she were a feather, flanked by Karen and Usha. They could hear the mechanical chittering of Alset hunter robots in the vents above. "Faster!" Marcus yelled. They burst into the main atrium. The massive city gates, titanium slabs distinct from the glass dome, were grinding shut. The gap was narrowing. 10 feet, 5 feet. "Slide!" Marcus roared. Usha and Karen dove through the narrowing gap. Marcus threw Susan forward into their arms and threw himself sideways just as the massive metal plates slammed together with a boom that shook the ground. They were out of the city proper, but they were still inside the perimeter airlock zone. The air here was thin, unconditioned. "My leg," Susan whimpered. Her ankle was swollen, purple. "We have to move," Karen said, coughing. "The air, it's thin." They needed respirators to cross the dead zone between the city and the outer dome exit, but the supply locker was mag-locked. They didn't have the time or the codes. "We go without them," Marcus said, hoisting Susan onto his back again. "We'll suffocate," Usha cried, panic rising. "Faith," Marcus said, his eyes burning with intensity. "We walk by faith, not by sight. Breathe in the spirit, not the air. We have the seal of God." They ran. Their lungs burned. Black spots danced in their vision. The Alset drones, sleek black machines with red optical sensors, detached from the city walls and gave chase. They reached the edge of the dome, the final service hatch. Marcus kicked it open, and they stumbled out into the night. They expected to choke. They expected the harsh, poisoned air the government claimed existed outside the domes. Marcus gasped, bracing for death. Instead, he filled his lungs with cool, sweet air. It smelled of pine and rain. "It's a lie!" Usha wept, falling to her knees. "It's all a lie! We can breathe!" "Move!" Karen screamed. The drones flew out of the hatch, weapons charging. But as they crossed the threshold of the city's perimeter, about 100 meters out, their lights flickered. The sophisticated AI, reliant on the 6G mesh network of the Beast system, lost its signal. The drones sputtered and crashed into the dirt, lifeless metal. In the distance, under the moonlight, stood a group of people. A tall man with a staff and a woman with a notebook. Elias and Sarah. Marcus limped forward, Susan clinging to his neck. He fell at Elias's feet. "Welcome home," Elias said, pulling Marcus up. "The Ark is sealed." Chapter 2. The Censer and the Glass Rain. Day 1 of the Tribulation. The reunion was brief. The 4 new arrivals, Marcus, Karen, Usha, and Susan, were tended to by the 144,000. Their injuries were bound with herbs from the wilderness. Their spirits were fed with the word. They were safe, sealed by the invisible mark of God on their foreheads, contrasting the glowing digital barcode that marred the right hands or foreheads of those inside the cities. That night, the sky changed. Elias stood on a ridge overlooking the distant, glowing dome of City 4. Sarah stood beside him, her pen hovering over her journal. "It begins," Elias whispered. The first trumpet sounded in the spirit realm, echoing in the physical. From the sanctuary of heaven, the censer of judgment was cast down. It didn't look like a meteor. It looked like a ripple in the fabric of reality. Inside the cities, the screams began. It started as a rash, a reaction to the nanotech within the mark. The medical miracle promised by the papacy and the tech giants turned into a curse. Boils, noisome and grievous, erupted on the skin of every man, woman, and child who had bowed to the image of the beast. The 144,000 watched from the hills. They could do nothing but pray. The agony lasted for months. The medical droids were useless. The AI doctors malfunctioned. The technology could not cure a wound inflicted by God. "Look at the dome," Marcus said, pointing. The massive geodesic structure, touted as the unbreakable shield of humanity, began to fracture. Hail and fire, mingled with blood, fell from the sky, not from space, but from the firmament itself. God was destroying the artificial atmosphere. The domes shattered. Billions of tons of reinforced glass and steel rained down on the cities. It was like a war zone. Skyscrapers were sheared in half. The perfect, climate-controlled environments were exposed to the raw, unfiltered elements of a world in judgment. This chaos lasted a year. The 144,000 remained untouched. The fire fell around them, but not on them. Their bread was sure. Their water was sure. Chapter 3. The Bloody Tide. Years 2 and 3. The second angel sounded. A great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. The oceans, which the elite claimed to own and patrol, turned to blood. Not red algae, but literal coagulating blood. The stench was unbearable, wafting even to the high mountains where the faithful hid. Every living soul in the sea died. The ships of commerce, the pride of the nations, rotted in the gore. Then the third angel sounded. A great star fell from heaven, burning like a lamp. It fell upon the rivers and fountains of waters. The fresh water, the lifeblood of the cities, turned bitter. Wormwood, inside the shattered remains of the cities, thirst became a greater torture than the sores. People fought over bottles of vintage water. They drank the blood water and died. Year 4. The fourth trumpet sounded, and the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun. The atmospheric shielding was gone. The sun, usually a source of life, became a weapon. It scorched men with great heat. The temperature inside the city ruins spiked to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, then 140. Sarah recorded the events with a heavy heart. "They are gnawing their tongues for pain," she wrote. And yet, she watched through long-range binoculars. The massive screens in the city squares, miraculously still functioning on emergency power, showed the Pope, the false prophet, standing in a cool underground bunker. He was blaming the fundamentalists, the haters of unity, and the refusers of the mark for the climate catastrophe. "Repent!" Elias cried out to the wind, though they could not hear him. But they blasphemed the name of God, who had power over these plagues. They did not repent to give him glory. They cursed the heat, they cursed the lack of water, but they clung to their sin. Chapter 4. Darkness and the Abyss. Year 5. The fifth trumpet sounded, and the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, the Vatican and the capital cities of the 10 kingdoms. A supernatural darkness fell. It was a darkness that could be felt, thick and suffocating like black wool. It was noon, but it was darker than midnight. The solar panels failed, the fusion reactors destabilized, and then the shaft of the bottomless pit was opened. Marcus and Usha stood guard at the perimeter of the camp. "Do you hear that?" Usha whispered. A sound like the whirring of a billion wings. From the cracks in the earth they emerged, not locusts of nature but demonic entities, shaped for war. They had hair like women, teeth like lions, and breastplates of iron. They bypassed the camp of the saints. They had orders. Hurt only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. For 5 months the screams from the cities were unlike anything human history had recorded. Men sought death, and death fled from them. Suicide became impossible. The demons would not let them die. They wanted them to suffer. The people in the cities cursed the beast now. They cursed the Pope. But their hearts were so hardened, they could not turn to the Creator. Chapter 5. The Gathering Storm. Year 6. The sixth trumpet sounded, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up. "The way of the kings of the east is prepared," Elias said, reading from the scroll of Revelation. 3 unclean spirits like frogs came out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Then, the ultimate deception occurred. The holographic projectors in the sky, combined with actual demonic manifestation, lit up the world. A figure appeared. He looked exactly like the paintings in the cathedrals, long blonde hair, blue eyes, white robe. He floated above the Vatican. "I am Jesus," the figure announced, his voice thundering over the face of the earth. "I have come to bring peace, but the rebels in the wilderness preventing the healing of the earth, they must be purged." It was Satan himself, transformed into an angel of light. The armies of the world, bruised, beaten, and covered in sores, found a new resolve. Energized by demonic possession, they mobilized. Tanks, hovercrafts, and millions of soldiers marched out of the broken cities. They surrounded the wilderness. They surrounded the mountains. In the camp, fear tried to take hold. Susan, now a teenager, looked at the horizon filled with the dust of the approaching army. "There are millions of them," she whispered. "And there are more with us than with them," Marcus said, though his hand gripped his staff tight. The faithful had been wearing the same clothes for years, yet, looking at them, the fabric was as new as the day they fled. Their shoes were not worn. They had not sickened. The army closed in. It was the darkest night of the soul. The demons hovered in the air, mocking them. "Where is your God?" they hissed. "He has abandoned you." For a moment, just a moment, the silence of heaven was deafening. Had they misunderstood? Was this the end? Elias stood on the rock. "Stand still," he shouted, his voice echoing with the power of Moses. "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Chapter 6. The Sky Scroll and the Bronze King. The Seventh Trumpet. The enemy armies crested the ridge, weapons raised. Then, a sound. It was not a siren. It was not a bomb. It was a trumpet blast so loud it vibrated the marrow in their bones. It was the voice of God. "It is done." The earth shook. The cities of the nations fell. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. The 144,000 looked up. The black sky above the flat earth began to tear. The firmament, the solid crystalline dome that had hidden the throne of God for millennia, began to crack. It groaned with the sound of tearing metal and rushing water. The globular illusion shattered. The waters above the firmament pulled back like a scroll rolling together. A light, brighter than the sun, poured through the opening. The armies of the beast stopped. The Jesus in the sky shrieked and dissolved into smoke, revealing the dragon beneath, who then cowered in terror. And then he appeared. Not the pale impostor, the King of Kings. He sat on a white horse, followed by the armies of heaven. His eyes were as a flame of fire. On his head were many crowns, and his skin, it was the color of polished bronze, glowing with the heat of a furnace. His hair was white like wool. He was terrifying. He was beautiful. "The Lord," Marcus wept, raising his hands. "He is here." The unrighteous in the armies dropped their weapons. They did not attack. They screamed, "Rocks, fall on us! Hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne!" The light of his purity was burning them worse than the sun. Then the graves exploded. From the dust of the earth, millions of bodies shot up. Those who had died in the faith, from Abel to the martyrs of the Middle Ages to those who died in the FEMA camps. They stood up, their bodies transforming from decay to glory in the twinkling of an eye. Then, the living. Marcus felt a tingle in his feet. He looked down. His worn sandals vanished. His body, scarred and tired, was suddenly flooded with light. He looked at Usha. She was glowing. Susan's leg was straight and strong. Density lost its hold. "We are going home!" Karen shouted. They lifted off the ground. The 144,000, joined by the multitude of the resurrected, ascended into the air. They rose past the crumbling cities, past the terrified armies of the Antichrist, past the shattered dome of the firmament. Jesus waited for them in the air, smiling. He led them through the parted waters of the firmament, just as Moses led the people through the Red Sea. They walked on the clouds as if they were solid ground. Behind them, the earth below was consumed by the glory of his presence. Chapter 7. The Judgment and the New Beginning, the Millennium. The saints stood on the sea of glass, mingled with fire, before the throne of God. They sang the song of Moses and the Lamb. Down on the earth, silence reigned. The wicked were slain by the brightness of his coming. The cities were rubble. There was no life. Only Satan remained. He stood in the ruins of the Vatican, bound by a chain of circumstances. There was no one left to tempt, no one to deceive. For 1,000 years, he would roam the desolate, broken earth, contemplating his rebellion. In heaven, the court was seated, the books were opened. The chosen saints, those who had died for their faith, and the 144,000 sat on thrones of judgment. They reviewed the records of the wicked, not to condemn them, but to understand why God could not save them. They saw the chances given, the warnings ignored, the hearts hardened. They declared God, Almighty Yahuwah, righteous and just. All of heaven rejoiced and praised God. The final showdown. The 1,000 years ended. The holy city, New Jerusalem, descended from God out of heaven. It was a massive city, shining like jasper and gold, drifting down through the firmament to rest on the earth. As the city touched the earth, the second resurrection occurred. The rest of the dead, the wicked from all ages, rose from their dusty graves. They were not glorified. They rose with the same bodies, the same diseases, the same rebellious spirits they died with. All of humanity, for the first and only time ever, was alive at once. Satan, released from his prison by their presence, saw his army. "Look," he shouted to the billions of resurrected wicked, "I have raised you! The city is ours! We can take it!" Among the crowd were tyrants, kings, popes, the wicked of all ages, and the billions who had taken the mark. They surrounded the camp of the saints, the beloved city. But as they rushed the walls, the great white throne appeared above the city. The books were opened. The deception ended. Every knee bowed. Hitler, Caesar, the false prophet, the arrogant scientists, the mockers, they all fell to their knees. They confessed that Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach, is Lord. They admitted their sentence was just. Then, fire came down from God out of heaven. The very atmosphere ignited. The earth dissolved in fervent heat. This was the lake of fire. It was not a place of eternal torture, but of eternal destruction. The wicked were consumed. They ceased to be. Satan, the root of sin, burned last, vanishing into smoke and ash. The earth was cleansed. The new earth. The fire ended. From the ashes, green shoots emerged. The Creator spoke. "Behold, I make all things new." The scarred, flat plain of the earth was recreated. The oceans that separated humanity were gone and were replaced by sparkling rivers and lakes. The desert bloomed like a rose. The firmament shone with a light that needed no sun, for the glory of God illuminated it. Marcus, Ravi, Karen, Usha, and Susan stood on a hill of emerald grass. They breathed in the air of eternity. "No more tears," Usha whispered, touching her face. "No more death." A lion walked past them, nuzzling a lamb. They looked toward the New Jerusalem, the gates of pearl standing open. Jesus, their king, their brother, waved to them from the garden. The long night of sin was over. The morning of eternity had just begun. "For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord."
For more Bible-based end-time prophecy dramas to strengthen your faith and the faith of others, help spread the word by supporting the channel. Please like, subscribe, and share.